They turn it on for us.
Oh, do they? Oh, perfect. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Latricia Davis, and I am the Ackerman Family Director of Education here at the Dallas Holocaust and Human Rights Museum. Thank you for joining us today to learn a little bit about, or all about, the Crystal City Walkout. Today's program is presented in conjunction with the Candy Brown Holocaust and Human Rights Educator Series. So I'd like to give a special thank you to our generous supporters of that series, Candy and Ike Brown. I'd also like to give a warm welcome to the educators in attendance today. Thank you for your commitment to your students and for taking time out of your summer to be with us. And thank you to the State Fair of Texas and the Education Service Center Regions 10 and 11 for their partnership and support for our teachers. We also have the Summerlee Foundation sponsoring today's program, so a huge thank you to everyone at Summerlee. Thanks to your, we're gonna flip my page. Love my little notes here. We all know as educators, former educator here, sometimes we get distracted. Support, the museum is able to host programs like these about important but often overlooked periods in Texas history. And quickly, before we begin, I would like to thank our community partners for this event, the Dallas Mexican American Historical League, the Jewish Federation of Greater Dallas, the Legacy Senior Communities, and the Vickery Meadow Youth Development Foundation. We are grateful for your support to the museum and of our programs. I'd also like to extend a special welcome to our board members, generations, and volunteers in attendance in the audience. We couldn't fulfill our mission without you. If you are interested in becoming a museum member or a volunteer, please visit our website at dhhrm.org to learn more. Our featured guest today is Diana Serna Aguilera, who took part in the historic Crystal City Walkout in 1969 after school administrators refused to address demands by Mexican American students for fair representation. In just one moment, Diana will share her full story with us, and then we will have time for questions and answers. If you are joining us today in person, you can use the card provided to you at check-in to write out your question, and our staff will come around at the end of the program to collect your cards. If you are joining us virtually, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen to type out and submit your questions. I now ask that you silence your cell phones so that we may all listen to Diana's story without disruptions. So let's begin. Diana, thank you again for joining us today. Let's begin by discussing the conditions of Crystal City that culminated in the historic student walkout in December of 1969. What was it like to grow up as a Mexican-American kid in Crystal City?
Growing up in Crystal City was an experience that was all-American for a Mexican-American because we were segregated. So growing up on Holland Street in the barrio, all I saw were Mexican-American people, and we had grocery stores, a gas station, and we didn't have to go out of our little area until we started school. But growing up, it was like we watched the news, got the newspapers. We had a lot of parties. We had fiestas, quinceañeras, weddings, and we had our extended family next door. We had our abuelita, and she made fresh tortillas all the time, and my parents had their siblings. Everybody lived in Crystal City. Nobody moved. So it was a beautiful, wonderful youth until I started school.
Let's provide a little bit more background. When and how did Mexican Americans settle in Crystal City?
Crystal City was established in 1907 by ranchers, and they needed farm workers. So the ranchers were very powerful, and they were able to convince that the Mexicans from Mexico, which was only 45 miles away, were exempt from the quotas for immigrants. So they would recruit Mexicans so they could come and work in the fields, and they recruited so many families that by the 1930s, the Mexican Americans were the majority. And because of their hard labor and their farming, Crystal City became the spinach capital of the world. And in 1937, we got a statue of Popeye.
Nice. How did your parents make a living, and how did they raise you?
My parents, my dad was a butcher, so he had a job. So we didn't migrate like the majority of the people in Crystal City that had to go up north to make a living. And my mother was a stay-at-home mom until my little brother, Edward, went to school, first grade. And after that, she was a Head Start teacher. I grew up with books. I grew up with encyclopedias, and even medical encyclopedia in Spanish from Mexico, and the Britannica. And my mother also got us Nancy Drew, Happy Hollisters, and all the other well-known books to American kids, because we were raised that reading was everything.
Okay. What were the tensions like at school and around town between the Mexican Americans and the Anglo or white communities? Do you remember being aware of any of this before you started attending school?
Not really. The only time I saw Anglo-Americans was at Mass, the ones that were Catholic, and those were the only ones that I really knew. Or when I would go to visit my dad when he was a butcher at the grocery store, El Rey, and the owner was the principal of the schools. So my dad was treated special because he had kids that came to visit, and I would always call and I'd say, "Can I talk to my daddy Joe?" And no, I'd say, "Can I talk to my daddy?" And they go, "Well, who's your daddy?" And I go, "Well, Daddy Joe," like expecting them to really know us because we'd go and visit, and my dad worked there.
At this time, I believe there were 2 elementary and junior high schools, schools for white children and schools for Mexican Americans and migrant children. You've mentioned that you bounced between the two schools at first. Can you share why that was?
Yes, because when you were going to enroll in first grade, there was a literacy test. And this literacy test was in English. Before we got a single class, we were tested. And if you didn't pass the test, you were put in the Mexican school, which was Airport Elementary and Airport Junior High. And I was there for 2 weeks. And because my mother had enrolled me in kindergarten with Miss Salazar, and you'd pay $1.50 before you went to first grade, I learned I learned the alphabet and I learned math. So I was only in the Mexican school for 2 weeks, and they realized that I was a little more advanced. So I was moved to the grammar school and then Fly Junior High, and that was with the whites. So I ended up going to school with whites because I was a good Mexican.
How did it feel to be told you were not allowed to speak Spanish? And how did that shape your identity at the time? What was your experience like with the rest of the classmates?
I was shocked. I was like, what? That's my first language. My grandma, my aunts, everybody, we all speak Spanish. And I grew up in the barrio where everybody spoke Spanish, and I couldn't believe it. I asked my mom, you know, you graduated from Crystal City High School in 1946. You knew English. How come you didn't teach me English? And she said, because when you get to school, they're going to take away your Spanish, and you're going to learn English, and you're not going to be able to speak Spanish anymore. And I go, not even here at home? And she said, no. So I grew up speaking both languages, but they would hit us. They would spank us. And some of the principals would raise our dresses and spank us if they caught us speaking Spanish. And it was horrifying because my parents never hit us, never spanked us, not even on the hand with a ruler. And so this was a big shock because that's where I learned violence, from the teachers.
You started talking about how the teachers treated you. Are there other specific examples of their actions and attitudes?
No, they were pretty good. Mainly because they would go to the grocery store to buy their meat, and they knew my dad would give them a better meat, better steaks, and they'd get their ribeyes from my dad. So I think that my dad, being the butcher and being real tall, dark, and handsome, helped.
Very nice. It wasn't just at your school. Your parents and grandparents were dealing with the larger citywide issues relating to their jobs, land, and city office positions. Can you share what happened with your uncle's bid for city tax assessor during the election cycle?
In 1964, my uncle, who married my mom's little sister, Tia Mague, Raul Flores, we called him Peta, ran for tax assessor collector, and he ran as an independent. And we worked real hard to get him elected. We had the whole city, we thought, behind us, and we registered a lot of people in 1964. And yet, and he was winning all the in-person voting, but then with the absentee, we were not allowed to have a poll watcher or anybody to look over the ballots. So we knew that we were going to lose. Turns out that he lost by 48 votes. So that was the introduction to politics, and it was a very hard lesson to learn. My uncle was discouraged and never ran again for anything.
Your grandparents were self-made, and they owned some land and a business. As all of this was going on, what happened to your grandparents' land?
My grandparents had a store named Las Fronteras, and this was during the Depression. And they also had a slaughterhouse, and they owned a lot of property by Highway 83. And then in 1965, Urban Renewal came and said that they needed her property, and they offered her $500, and she said, no, I'm already getting $40 a month for a billboard. And they said, well, we're going to take it eminent domain. So they did. They did the eminent domain, offered her the $500, and my grandma, being educated and all, she took them to court, and she lost the money, she lost the land, and that was that.
Now, all of this is occurring during the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 60s. Racial tensions are high across the country. What news, if any, did you receive about discrimination about Mexican Americans from outside Crystal City? And were there rumors of activism on that front?
Well, as a family, we all sat down at 10 o'clock and saw the evening news, so we knew what was going on with the African-American community, Martin Luther King, and we also listened to Spanish language radio, so we were real informed about what was going on in the world.
Now, you entered high school in 1969. As the racial dynamics were rapidly changing, there was a larger Mexican-American population at this school, but you were still experiencing discrimination?
Yes, the main thing was that other than the Spanish and the segregation, we had cheerleader tryouts, and it was an unwritten rule, a tradition, a custom, that only one Mexican American could be elected cheerleader. The other three had to be white. And we were 87% of the population, and they were only 15%. And that was also, there was also a problem with the most handsome and the most beautiful, because they would have outsiders come, and like Pat Boone and other Glenn Campbell, and they would choose who was the most beautiful and the most handsome. Well, needless to say, we rarely got to be elected for those positions. There was also no bilingual education. We were requesting bilingual education because we were already bilingual. We were taught to speak English quickly if we wanted to talk at all. Those that didn't learn how to speak English in the elementary would say nothing. They wouldn't participate, and they would not get called on, and they were left behind, and eventually we had a very high dropout rate.
When did you and the other Mexican American students begin to gather and say, enough is enough?
Well, in March of 1969, there was a rally, and in that rally, they announced the new cheerleaders. And of course, as usual, as going back on history, it was 3 whites and 1 Mexican American. And my sister, who was a senior at the time, Libby Serna, said, why don't things change? And she was a senior, and she felt compelled that, I wasn't going to get a chance to be a cheerleader, or none of my friends were going to be able to cheerleaders, because there was already a Mexican-American cheerleader, Diana Perez Garcia now. And once that cheerleader was elected, she was the chosen token elected cheerleader until she graduated. And she felt that this was not fair, because there was many of us that wanted to try out, but we knew and were discouraged that until Diana Perez graduated, we really couldn't try out, or we shouldn't try out, because we were not going to be, we knew the rules. So there, my sister, she went to her typing class, and she typed up the first petition. And in that petition, she made recommendations and recommended that maybe we should have 2 and 2, because there was only 4 at the time. Two whites and 2 Mexican Americans. And then she also wanted bilingual education, us not to be spanked, and dividers in the girls' dressing room for privacy, and to pave the parking lot, because it was always muddy when it rained. So she added some few things so that she could negotiate, so we could win the important things like most popular, most beautiful, to let the students vote. Why weren't they letting us to vote so we could learn how to vote? And instead, why were the teachers the ones that were deciding who was going to be a cheerleader? So it was all my sister.
After your sister wrote this petition, and you see her activism, how did you respond?
Well, there's the second part to that story is that my sister took that petition, and she was going to take it to the principal, but she got scared. And she really liked the principal, Mr. Laird, but she said, I'm going to recruit some friends. So she did. She recruited Blanca Trevino, Marta Avila, and two other girls to go with her. And they accompanied her to the principal's office. And they went in, and my sister handed the petition to Mr. Laird. He got real red, and he was angry. He crumpled up the petition and threw it in the trash and said it was a bunch of baloney. And they were shocked. So they left, and they didn't know what to do, because before they left, he threatened them. He said, y'all are seniors, and if you want to graduate, you're going to have to stop doing this. If you continue, I'm going to see to it that you don't graduate. So they left defeated.
In his response and reaction, it moves up to the superintendent. What occurred when you were able to meet with the superintendent and spoke with the governing body of the school district?
Well, hearing my sister's story, because I was with her all the time back then, in the Mexican culture, you had to have a chaperone. So wherever she went, I had to go. So I knew all her friends, and I knew how disappointed they were and how hurt they were. And there was Blanca's little brother, Mario Trevino, and I, and then Severita Lara. We said, we have to do something about this, because they can't be treating us like this. We're 85% and growing. You know, it goes up to 90% at a certain point. And we need to have representation, and we have to be treated like Americans, because we are being treated like second-class citizens, and we're tired of this, and we're not going to put up with it. So we asked for a meeting with the superintendent, Mr. Billings, and he was gracious enough to give us a meeting, and we met, and he said, okay, what we're going to do is there's going to be 3 and 3. 3 Mexican-American cheerleaders and 3 white cheerleaders. There's going to be 1 of each of most handsome and 1 of each of most beautiful. And so we were like, oh, okay. And then, you know, some people were going like, wait a minute, you're the majority, and that's not half and half. And we go, well, at least we got something. It's better than nothing. And so we were happy with it.
What happened when you spoke with the rest of the school district? How did the rest of the school district respond? And kind of what drove their refusal?
Well, what happened is that summer, the majority of the Crystal City students left up north, North Dakota, Wisconsin, Montana, all these winter crops, and they went to work there, actually summer crops. They went to work up north because they couldn't make a living on the salaries that they were making in Crystal City. That was not just Crystal City, it's all of South Texas. All of South Texas, a lot of the people, the kids from Crystal City in school were born in Minnesota, Wautoma, Wisconsin, all these places all around the country, and even in Princeton, Texas, where they would come to work in the onion fields. So they followed the crops. And because we were all gone, they took advantage at a school board meeting, and they didn't even tell some of us students that didn't go up north that there was going to be a board meeting, and they met, and they said that the superintendent did not have the authority to negotiate with the students, and that agreement was null and void, and it was going to go back to the way it always was, 3 whites and 1 Mexican American.
What do you think drove the school district's refusal to allow Mexican Americans to fully participate in student life?
It was segregation. They wanted to make sure that we didn't start dating each other because, you know, we had a lot of good-looking girls and boys on both sides, and it was only normal to try to date. But if you did date someone outside of your culture, then you had to do it behind their backs. And they saw that we were assimilating real well because we'd go up north, and up north, the white people were a lot different. They would date the guys, they would date the girls, and it was mingle, and they'd marry, and you know, we'd come back and say, why can't we date, you know, whoever we love? And it was impossible because the community really didn't want us to mix race.
After finding out about the school board's decision, how did you go about organizing students and community members who had grievances and wanted to push for change?
We started having rallies at the Placita. It was called Little Mexico, that part of town. And important community member moved back to Crystal City. His name was Jose Angel Gutierrez, and his wife, Luz Bazan Gutierrez. And that was in June. So when they moved back, they had heard about all what had been going on, and they opened their house and started to organize the students. They brought some professionals, including a Jewish lawyer, Paul Rich, and Viviana Santiago. Some people were volunteers with Vista, and they helped us to develop a new petition with a lot more demands. We were demanding multicultural education, bilingual education, and we would say, yes, you have the funds. They claimed there was no money, but we had the research that there was money available from the federal government. So we were real well prepared, and we asked for a meeting with the school board. We were told that we had to get on the agenda. We got on the agenda, and we went all over town telling people, we're going to have a big meeting. This is going to be it. This is when we're going to win our rights. This is when we're going to end discrimination in Crystal City. But we need you. We need for you, the people, to come and show support for us, the students, because Jose Angel didn't believe in him taking over and him asking for the meetings, but for us students to take the initiative and for us to go and request our demands.
How did the city and the school board respond to your showing up to the meeting?
Well, at first we knew we were going to have hundreds of people. And Crystal City is a small population, 10,000. And so we went all over and we had people with bullhorns, and people were going to saloons and bars and church and everywhere, all religions, and we were saying, we're going to have this big meeting December 8th, put it in the Zavala County Sentinel. We advertised, and so we told them, we want the meeting to be in the auditorium. And they go, why? And we never have it in the auditorium. It's a school board meeting. Nobody comes. I said, no, people are coming. And the administration building is too small. We begged, and they said no. So on December 8th, we had hundreds of people, probably about 150, maybe not hundreds, but the student leaders were able to go in, and we surrounded the school board members around the conference table. Then we opened up all the windows, and as far as you could see, there was people lined up by the window, wanting to hear, wanting to see. Well, for 2 hours, they had talked about contracts, pencils, and paying the bills, and doing this and that. And we waited, and it was so hot. They were sweating. We were sweating because we had opened up the windows, and the people outside were sweating. And they just, all of a sudden, they said, well, we reviewed the petition, and we found no discrimination, and the meeting is adjourned. And so Armando Trevino, Mario's older brother, got up and said, well, he was standing. He said, but we're on the agenda. This is America. You have to listen. We have a right to petition our government. And they go, boy, you're out of order. So they got up and they left the room. And we just started crying. We just started crying because our parents were there, our grandparents were there, and they were crying. And even men were crying. And we're like, what do we do now? This is it. This is the end of the line. And they wouldn't even hear us. They didn't respect us. They treated us like non-citizens. They were just uncaring. And they didn't care about the students. They didn't care that we were the majority and that we were the ones paying the teacher salaries because of the ADA, which is average daily attendance. And if what we were going to tell them is that if we don't get what we want, then we're not going to go to school and you're not going to get money to pay your teachers. But they wouldn't even let us make that threat, I guess, because they knew that we were well organized and they knew that we were going to be ready for them, and they still did it. Thank you.
So you started mentioning that you had that threat, the threat that you could walk out, not show up and the school wouldn't receive funding. Is this where the walkout idea started? And what's kind of the root of that walkout decision?
Well, when they got up and left, we went outside, and somebody drove a pickup truck, and the student leaders, Severita Lara, Mario Trevino, and myself, we hopped on top, and we were telling the community, see how they treat us? This is how they treat us. And worse, because you're here and they're doing it in front of you. They don't respect us. They don't care about us. They don't care about our education. And they don't respect you. So my father said, well, they rule inside, but we rule outside. And he said it in Spanish, Ellos mandan adentro, pero nosotros mandamos afuera. Walk out, walk out. And I was like, oh, yeah, walk out, walk out.
Can you take us back to that first day of the walkout? How were you feeling? What were you thinking? What was the energy like among the other students?
Well, that night, that was December 8th, and we had decided we were going to walk out the next day, December 9th. And we stayed up till about 3 in the morning doing posters. And that's the poster that you see out in the outside in your program. And it's of students with the posters that we made. I'm not in the picture because I was the one taking the pictures. Oh, unfortunately. But I took about 6 pictures, and they've all been donated to the Holocaust. So the original pictures are here, and you will be able to view them whenever they have them in exhibit. And what happened is that the next day, we had made a plan, and so we went to the school early. We said the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. Then we said a prayer, and then we, as the students were coming, we were telling them what happened the night before, how their parents, and our grandparents were all crying because they had treated us badly. And the students themselves, including my friend Yolanda that's here in the audience, she didn't even tell her mom that she was going to walk out. She said, I'm going to walk out. I'm not going to class. So we had a lot of people, students, that right then and there decided that they were going to support us, because we said if we don't have your support, we're not going to win, and things are going to go back to the way they were. So we planned that some of us would stay outside to talk to the students coming in, and then some would go inside to the classrooms and spread the word for the students that were already there, and then they would walk out one by one, and eventually we had the majority of the high school students out in the walkout.
How long did you abstain from returning to school?
It was 2 weeks, and then 2 weeks between the Christmas break. So we were out for almost a month. But during our Christmas break, we had teams. That's Texas Educators for the Advancement of Mexican Americans, and they sent all kinds of teachers. They sent professionals. Word had gotten out, and so we had a lot of, we didn't actually miss classes because we had wonderful classes. We had people that taught us science, math, and it was like, wow, this is a better education than we're getting in the regular classroom. We loved it. It was so neat, and we were having classes, and the older seniors and some that had graduated were teaching the young kids, and because eventually we had other grades join us. And we were at churches, dance halls, so just any place where we could have a gathering of about 30 students.
Were there other walkouts happening across the state at the same time?
Yes, according to some research that was done, there had been about 37 other walkouts, but none had been successful. What would happen is that they would refuse to listen to the demands of these students, and eventually they would give up. That's why they didn't want to negotiate with us, because they said, oh, just let them, it'll burn out. The parents will put them back in class, and then it'll be a failure just like all the other ones. That's what they expected.
And their expectations, what really happened? How did the teachers and the school board respond? Like, what were their responses to the walkout? Did they try to contain it?
Yes, they did. They said that for every day that we were out, we were going to be docked 2 points from our grades, and any test that we had, we were going to get zeros. So unfortunately, that was their undoing, because after a week we go, well, we're going to flunk anyway. Why go back? So, they did try. They'd see us. I had a friend, Diana March, that came up to me and said, why? And she was crying. She said, why are you doing this to us? You're a good Mexican. Yeah, she was a real good friend of mine.
What role did your family and community play in supporting or questioning your involvement in the walkout?
We had 100% support. As a matter of fact, when they treated us so badly, my mom even said, "Why can't y'all be like the Black Panthers?" What? Oh, no, Mom. You know, we watched Martin Luther King's speech to the mountaintop. I said, and we're nonviolent. No, no, Mom, that's not going to work in Crystal City. They have all the guns. These are ranchers, cowboys, vaqueros. And so, but we had the support. Mom, I never told anybody about what Mom had said because it frightened me. It's like, no. But the reason we watched Martin Luther King, it was because Joan Baez was going to be the entertainer, one of the entertainers. So we were so lucky, but right afterwards, because it ran late, we went to bed, so we didn't know that Martin Luther King Jr. had been killed that night. We didn't find out till the next day. So we had the television, we had the African American movement to influence us, and before us, we had a lot of community members that were real adamant that we kept our culture, that we kept our language. So we would celebrate Cinco de Mayo because that's, Texas used to be Mexico at one time. So we'd celebrate the Cinco de Mayo because that's when Mexico kicked out the French. And then we'd celebrate 16 de septiembre because that's when Mexico kicked out the Spaniards. So there was a history that the older abuelitas and abuelitos strive to keep alive, and for us not to totally assimilate and be ashamed of who we were. They wanted to make sure that they knew that we knew our background, we knew our heritage, and that there was a lot of Tejanos that fought in the Alamo. It wasn't just David Crockett.
Besides your mother's comment, were you ever afraid during the walkout? And why or why not?
I was not afraid, not at all. I did get a hate letter that's also in the museum now, and it was handwritten and in red ink. And they said that they were ready to pitch me and my leader friends to the wolves, and that I should go back to Russia. I didn't get that.
Eventually, the media picks up your story. How did this influence this national, or the media kind of influence your momentum or bring pressure to bear on local leaders?
Well, the media was very helpful in us getting attention from San Antonio, and we got help from San Antonio leaders that were always a lot more advanced than we were, and there was Idra, and Juan Patlan Juan Patlan set up a meeting with Senator Ralph Yarbrough. And Senator Ralph Yarbrough was the people's senator. And he set up the meeting in Washington, D.C., and that changed our lives.
Now, Crystal City, of course, is part of the larger movement, Mexican-American civil rights movement, which also used the term Chicano movement. What does it mean? Why is it important to some activists, and why did activists choose to use that term?
From what I learned was that we would use the word Chicano to mean that we were politically aware. So when somebody says that they're a Chicano, that means they're politically aware. And it's a name that we gave to ourselves, not one that was assigned to us. And later, my parents didn't like it because they said it sounded too much like chicanery. So I kind of, okay, Mexican-American. And now, of course, you have Hispanic and Latino, and that's to include all Spanish-speaking people from other countries, including Puerto Ricans and Cubans and others, and all of them.
Now, with the influence, the media, the help from San Antonio, you end up being invited to Washington, to D.C. What do you remember most vividly about your trip?
The plane ride. It was the first time the three of us had ever flown, and it was so awesome, and I couldn't believe it. It was breathtaking, and looking at the clouds and all that, it made me not even worry about meeting these government officials, and it just brought some kind of I relaxed knowing that this time something was going to be done, or else I wouldn't be on that plane.
So would you say that you were hopeful? Were you nervous? Were you skeptical? What were you feeling and thinking about in preparation for meeting with those federal legislators?
I was so excited because we had already prepared for the school board, and we thought, okay, we prepared for nothing. And when we ended up going to Washington, all the points that we were going to point out to the school board, we related to them. And so I was excited. I was not nervous or anything, and even though I was 15 and I had just turned 16 2 months before. I was the youngest. It was 15, 16, and 17 when we started. By the time we got to Washington, I was 16. So we were young, and we were fearless at the time.
What were the outcomes of this meeting?
Well, meeting George Herbert Walker Bush was really an eye-opener because for the first time I had a very important government official sit down and take notes, listen, eye contact, and took action. We also met Edward Kennedy, and of course some met other officials. But the one I got, because there's only three of us, so we had to split up because so many senators wanted to meet us, and Congress people, and they took us to the Senate restaurant where we ate, and we were treated like royalty. And I said, okay, I can get used to this. I like it. And so by the time we landed at the airport in San Antonio, Texas, and we had a Channel 5, NBC, ABC, CBS. We had a news conference, and by the time we got back to Crystal City, we heard that the Department of Justice, the Civil Rights Division, was already there. They were waiting on us so that they could start negotiations with the school board.
What were the outcomes of that negotiation?
We won. We won. Yep. We had meetings that lasted until 2 in the morning. We had religious leaders, we had community leaders, we had the white leaders that were against us, we had both sides, we had my mom and several other parents, not too many. We had a small crowd, it was manageable, and we had Mr. Mata and Mr. Green, I believe, that were the ones that were running the show, and the school board knew that they had to negotiate with us because we were not going to go back and they were going to have to close down all the schools because there would be no more money because of the ADA.
Once they finally approved the demands, did it feel like a victory, or were you unsure that everything would be fulfilled?
Oh, it was a victory. I ended up being a cheerleader. Oh, yeah, it was a big victory. We could speak Spanish, English, and I was hoping that we could even get some French in there, but they said, okay, that's enough.
Looking back, what long-term impact did the walkout have on the education policy and representation for Mexican American students in Texas?
We got counselors that would give us applications and help us fill them out so that we could attend universities. 4 of my siblings, we graduated from the University of Texas in Austin, and the migrant students that got free scholarships for St. Edward's University, room and board and spending money. So a lot of my classmates that walked out ended up being teachers. So that's long term. Some of them are just retiring because I'm 70 now, and I'm I'm so impressed with the outcome because we got El Centro de Salud, we got money for a health clinic in Crystal City. We still don't have a hospital, but we were able to lift ourselves up and be educated, which made all the difference in the world. We got all kinds of money to fix the streets. We got just a lot of educators came to teach in Crystal City. We had the first Mexican-American superintendent, Angel Noé Gonzalez, and in Amancio Cantu, the assistant, and they wrote grants. One of the grants was called COPS, and what it was teaching some graduate Crystal City students to become teachers there in Crystal City and not have to leave Crystal City because they'd go to Uvalde and go to Southwestern Junior College. And we have a lot of teachers there in Crystal City that got their teaching certificates because of the programs and the grants that these Mexican-American administrators brought in. We had bilingual education from junior high to maybe even elementary all the way up to high school. And that helped because when we went to the universities, we placed out on Spanish, so we got like a whole free semester because I got 15 hours of credit for Spanish.
I'm going to give you one more question before we open it up, our conversation, to more Q&A with the audience. Do you think the success of the walkout changed how young people viewed the power to affect change in their power to change, affect change in political system?
Absolutely. Crystal City is one of the few places in the country where over 90% of the people, community that are eligible to vote.
So I want to thank you for a wonderful conversation, and I know you have so many great stories to add to it. I do want to open it up for questions, so if you have any questions, please write them down on those note cards that you were able to pick up, and then raise them in the air for the staff to collect, and then we will start those. I actually have one right here. Did you experience bullying from the white children in your grammar school because you did not speak English at first?
Yes, I did. As a matter of fact, when I was in class, what I used to say chicken instead of chicken. So I remember my friends, and they were good friends. They surrounded me, and they say, "How do you say it? How do you say it?" And I'd say, "Chicken, chicken." And they laughed, and I'd laugh with them because, hey, it was funny. And right away, my sister, when I told my sister, she sat me down and she taught me how to say chicken right away, and then I was no fun.
You talked about the teachers and the school board, their reactions to the walkout and them trying to prevent, but were there any teachers who were supportive of the walkout?
Not really. They were scared. They were scared for their job. They were intimidated. So, they behind the curtain, they would say, we experienced that, but we never thought we could do anything. And so, but a lot of the teachers they just called us names and radicals and little Cuba and all that, and they were not. But they were still fair, I still graduated, top 10.
Once you returned to school, how did the teachers and the other students treat you?
Well, right after that, because of the students registering a lot of people to vote, we actually took over the school board. We elected the majority. And once that happened, we had white flight. So what little white kids we had, they left. And it just reminded me of one thing that I forgot to mention, but when I was in the 5th grade, one of my better friends, Becky Van Cleef, came up to me and told me that she couldn't be my friend anymore because I was a Mexican. And I was like, then I found out my brother, Jose Serna Jr., also had experienced that he had white friends, and then all of a sudden they stopped talking to him. So I don't blame the students. I blame the parents. It was the parents. Yeah. so that'll stay with me forever. But I never saw her again, and most of the people that left town to go to other schools didn't come back. I didn't go back. I've been in Dallas over 40 years now. Yeah.
Did any of the white students join the walkout?
No. No, they didn't. Beverly Stauber? Well, she stayed behind. That was the doctor's daughter, but no, she didn't walk out. But she stayed, and we elected her drum major, so we were fair. Yeah. Thanks for mentioning that. And I also like to point out that the state representative, former Roberto Alonso, is right here, and I think we pulled him out of school when he was in elementary school.
Did the school ever apologize?
No.
Did any of the surrounding towns, schools, or towns support the walkout?
They did. And Uvalde, Texas, remember Robstown? That Uvalde. They did have a walkout. However, they were not the majority. So they were unsuccessful, and all the kids that walked out were flunked for a whole year.
Oh.
Yeah. So that kind of put a stop to walkouts.
How did your experience during and after the walkout influence your decision to eventually pursue law, advocate for the rights of others? Kind of how did it influence your future?
I realized that what we were fighting for, which was equal educational opportunity, is the key to move up in America. And that fact that there's so much discrimination going on in our schools even today drove me to work for the Dallas Independent School District for 27 years, doing legal research and teaching due process. And due process means, you have a right to be heard, you have a right to a representative, and you have a right to cross-examine your accusers, which in my case was the school board, and that you'd be surprised how many people hear due process, but they don't know what it is. And all it is having the right to be heard and defend yourself and have a representative.
I love that you mentioned you worked with DISD, because my next question actually comes from a retired middle school teacher, an ESL teacher from DISD, who said, "I agree reading that is the foundation of education. What education did your parents and grandparents have that enabled them to be so wise and supportive?"
Good question. My grandma actually was a Spanish teacher. She was born in Floresville in 1902, Floresville, Texas, and she became a Spanish teacher, but she had to go to Mexico, even though she was an American citizen, born and raised here, so that she could get an education. So she would travel, because Crystal City is only 45 miles from there. And because my grandma was also a businesswoman, very successful businesswoman that lost her husband when he was 42, raised her five daughters and one son, and she was instilled in us to be proud of who we were and being educated. My mother graduated from Crystal City High School in 1946. My dad was just real business-wise and didn't have a lot of formal education. I believe it was 3rd, 4th grade only, but he did manage to become a sheriff in 1972, and he opened a Golden Chick in 1976. So sometimes education works, and sometimes being smart and a business person also helps. And being together, my mom and dad, they raised all their children to value education. And right now we have 6 lawyers, we have a district attorney, we have a county attorney, we have a judge in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, we have principal, my sister. So it goes on, and that's just my family.
We had a question. Did you get involved with La Raza Unida political party, and could you explain what it is?
Yeah, the Raza Unida Party came out of Ciudadanos Unidos. Ciudadanos Unidos is Citizens United. I know, the translation, right? And Citizens United, Ciudadanos Unidos was a group of parents that came together to decide what candidates they were going to elect. But we were having a hard time getting elected past the primaries for the Democratic Party. The Republican Party was really not strong in Texas at the time. So they would always put someone that was more of a sellout, or we just couldn't get on the ballot. So Jose Angel Gutierrez, when he came to town, along with Marta Cotera and other leaders in the community, they formed this organization called Raza Unida so that we could get on the ballot. And that's when we started getting people elected, like my father, because we were the majority.
What resources would you recommend for us to learn more about the Crystal City Walkout and Mexican American civil rights movement in general?
Oh, there's a lot of that information on the internet. If you spend time on educational websites and not so much on social media and Facebook, yeah, you can learn a lot. Now they're banning books, but who cares? There's books all over the place. Go to half-price books. Buy your kids books. Buy some shelves. I give my relatives books, and they don't even have shelves. You know, these kids, the fourth, fifth generation. It's like, what's going on here? You have to buy books. You have to learn to read. You can't just rely to get your news on the media, because half of the media, I mean, a lot of the media is false disinformation. And the thing is that you also need to make sure that your family gets registered to vote. If they're Americans, there's no reason for them not to register and vote. I've talked to Mexican Americans, and they say they're scared. They're scared to vote. And they're scared because you need people to help you. We need white people, black people, we need Asians, Indians, we need all people to get together so that they can register their families so that they can vote for the benefit of the community, not just a few.
Kind of building on that thought, what lessons from 1969 do you think resonate most urgently today?
It all comes from your family. And people talk about family values. Well, what is family values? Family values is valuing your family, getting together, seeing them on their birthdays, going to quinceañeras, going to their weddings, baptisms. If you're religious, going to mass, meeting people there. You have to be involved in the community. Don't stay home and watch television all the time. Don't be on the social media all the time. That's what I learned. I also learned that these kids are smart. They're smart. I was 14, 15, actually, when I was being chaperoned and my sister started the petition. I was only 14. I already knew. I already knew that we had to get organized. I already knew that we had to get involved. And I already knew that you have to leave your comfort zone. Go out into the streets and register people. Ask your neighbors if they've voted and if they're registered. But you have to take the step, and you have to get involved. You have to do something.
I have a question for you. Crystal City has an interesting history from being a former internment campsite. Did being on the grounds where Japanese, German, and Italian Americans were incarcerated influence your walkout?
Oh yeah, I was there for 2 weeks because the airport elementary schools and all those for Mexican Americans, those were the buildings of the interns. Those were the former internment camps. Those were renovated. And the houses there, that's where some of the teachers that came to teach us lived. Those houses were better than some of our shacks. But it was not well known. I didn't really know we had internment camps, and I didn't even know that it wasn't just the Japanese. We also had the Germans, we had Italians, and we had Nazis there. And what happened is those Nazis Nazified some of our German Americans.
So much interesting history, and especially local history, the importance of it. Final question. What message would you offer to the young people today about standing up for themselves in the face of injustice?
Share with your parents. Don't suffer. Don't suffer by yourself. Share with your siblings like my sister did. And don't internalize it, because things will get better if you stand up for your rights, if you find out what opportunities are available. Do that research. Take the kids to the library. Do something about, don't just let the teachers do all the work, because they can't. They're overwhelmed. You need to teach your kids how to stand up for themselves, to fight for their rights, to read the Constitution. I just bought a bunch of copies. All my family, they probably have so many copies of the Constitution. And even the Federalist Papers is just go to Half Price. They're all over here. We have a wonderful one on Northwest Highway. Take them there on a weekend and show them, and you'd be surprised how much they'll appreciate it, and how much they're going to thank you, and how successful they will be in the future. Thank you.
Don't want to cut it off there. Thank you, Diana, for joining us. Thank you to all of you for joining us as well this afternoon. We thank you for sharing your story, your wise words, and we thank you all and hope that you will have a restful and cool summer day.
Thank you, Leticia, and thank you, audience, for taking the time on a Tuesday to be here to hear us. Thank you.